Hello. I'd like to visit briefly with you about healthcare service as a system. Systems thinking is an abstract idea, and it involves a shift of mind, a different way of thinking about things. Peter Checkland in the UK and Peter Senge in the US have helped many of us understand systems thinking. The parts of their work that seems relevant to our use of the idea of systems thinking for healthcare service systems involves recognizing the elements that are in relationship with one another for a purpose. So a system is a series or a collection of elements which are in relationship for a purpose. Usually, these elements are in a non-linear relationship. That is to say, they interact one with another. A third important feature is that one level of system is usually embedded within another. And lastly, systems and systems thinking allow us to see processes of change rather than snapshots associated with this intervention or that intervention. Many years ago, Ludwig Wittgenstein, the linguistic philosopher, observed that you can't really enter a world for which you do not have the language. And so it is that we're working on this language of systems thinking. We know that systems can be found in the human body at several levels. At the cellular level, the system is focused on survival, and a subsystem within that set of survival activities has to do with the purpose of protein synthesis, for example. At another level, there's an organ system. And at the organ system level, one might see the purpose of digestion or blood circulation. At still a third level, the level of the organism, you see the focus on survival and things like reproduction and adaptation and growth. Some years ago, W. Edwards Deming observed that one could view a system of production that was capable of continual improvement. That was the insight that he worked with people in Japan after World War II. And the more that I thought about his graphic representation of a system that was capable of continual improvement, the more I began to realize that we might be able to use that same idea, but that it would help us if we would use some more familiar words for us. And so the words that I used included were how we create or make healthcare service, what society needs, and how we improve what we make. These elements in relationship with one another and interdependent. This linkage, then, is the idea of an open system of healthcare service capable of continual improvement. As we explore the different levels of system in healthcare service, we can recognize the self system, where an individual and the source of information come together to inform the behaviors and activities of an individual. There's the individual professional and patient system, the familiar dyadic system of professional and patient. There's the microsystem, which reflects multiple disciplines and multiple professionals who come together with patients and families to be, I think, the core building block for healthcare service systems as we know them today. The mesosystem, which is a collection of microsystems, and the macrosystem, which reflects multiple mesosystems that come together, and the market or geopolitical system, which operates at still a different level. So when we think about the Ruiz case or the public health case or the Sovaldi case, we need to be clear at which system level we want to practice in, change, or intervene in, or measure, or create policy that's useful. But these multi-level systems are often not in such perfect alignment. Actually, this lack of alignment is one way of thinking about waste in healthcare service systems. Our focus today is at the level where professionals and the beneficiaries of professional activity meet. And that's usually in the clinical microsystem, the small systems that work at the front lines of healthcare services. Who are and what are parts of the clinical microsystem for cystic fibrosis at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, for example? There's Annie and Annie's mom, who are key in understanding that system. But it's not just Annie and her family. It also involves the nurses in several different roles. And it involves the other professionals, including laboratorians, nutritionists, social workers, physical therapists, and so on. It also involves the physicians, who are playing different roles, doing different kinds of activities, and the information and the technology that also is an element, a key part in this clinical microsystem. Together, they work on Annie's behalf. And they constitute, in our judgment, what Toyota was talking about when he talked about Gemba, or going to the place where the value is actually created. And we were kind of proud of ourselves when we came up with this ability to represent this fundamental building block. And then we learned that in 1935, Professor Lawrence Henderson, a chemist and physiologist of acid-base metabolism in the body, and later in his life a sociologist, explained how patients and doctors were part of the same system. Well, as we explore healthcare service system, there are some special characteristics of healthcare service systems, and they include different health professional roles, which are usually informed by discipline-specific epistemologies. The difference in logic that's involved when you consider yourself to be making a service or making a product. The reality that there is an endless need as we all try to be as healthy as possible. Payment mechanisms that are different and try to create acceptable means of reimbursement to fuel the system's work. The social forces of regulation and the legal methods of achieving accountability in healthcare services, and then the presence of numerous external agents, not directly involved in making a healthcare service, but involved in influencing the making of that healthcare service. Further, we can see the principal tasks of each system level. At the top is the microsystems, the series of microsystems that are at work. It's the value-adding work. The mesosystems, which enable the microsystems to work well together with a good flow of service on behalf of patients. And then the macrosystem, where the settings, aims, and the context for the work is actually set up. Each level is important, but each level has different leadership work. So let's go back to the level where patients and professionals meet to co-produce healthcare service, the so-called Gemba of healthcare service. At the microsystem, leaders foster awareness of the microsystem and improvement. After all, the system is invisible, and so calling attention to the elements and the way it's behaving becomes one of the principal reflective tasks of the leader. Attracting the elements so that they understand their relationship to each other and to the common aim. Maintaining an environment of learning and development and ongoing improvement for those who are involved. Measuring for both operations and as an aid in reflective practice. Connecting the outcomes of system performance and professional development. Assisting members in the design and testing of changes for improvement. And serving as an advocate for improvement to meet organization priorities. But this isn't always so easy. Students of systems like Margaret Wheatley and Myron Kellner Rogers have observed that living systems do not accept direction, only provocation. Systems leave us with no choice but to become interested experimenters, sending pulses into the system to see what it notices. And that if we want to work with a system to influence its direction, a normal desire as we work with human organizations, the place for us to work is deep in the dynamics of the system, where the system's identity is actually taking form. There are some challenges involved in healthcare service system thinking and change that we regularly face. And I think Peter Vail, a lifetime student of systems thinking, has articulated them well. He suggests that what makes it hard to learn about systems thinking is that we actually prefer to think in black and white or either or terms. We prefer to believe in simple, linear cause-effect relationships. We prefer to ignore feedback. We prefer to ignore relationships between a phenomenon and the environment or the context in which that phenomenon is operating. We prefer to isolate a phenomenon in time, ignoring time-based cycling. We prefer to ignore the natural boundaries of a phenomenon over our designated boundaries. And we prefer to believe that we can somehow describe a phenomenon independent of ourselves as the perceivers. Some common traps when thinking of healthcare service as a system include not recognizing the different system levels that are at work, assuming that systems cannot simultaneously be represented in multiple ways, deterministic, probabilistic, chaotic. And when we tend to divorce the search for insight and understanding from the testing of change and taking action. He notes that the special learning challenges include the reality that open systems forever transcend complete understanding, because as learners we're immersed in ongoing inquiry, and our inquiry inevitably alters the dynamics of the open system. So we are pushed into understanding ourselves in relationship to the system, and that the essentials of systems thinking itself are really content-free. And so the change process invites careful understanding before taking action, lest we fall victim to this fate that Wheatley and Rogers describe. They say, because we haven't understood organizations, we have hurt one another deeply. We joined together to accomplish a purpose, we spun intricate webs of relationships, and a system emerged. But then what happened if we disliked what emerged? How did we respond? Usually, we turned on one another. We singled out one leader, one team, a few troubling individuals. We thought that if we changed them or got rid of them, our problems would be solved. So I've come to appreciate that every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. And we can't expect different results without changing the design of the system that produced them. And to do that, we must inquire into the way these systems work. Thanks.